Hello students, in this video lecture I am going to discuss the concept of minimal element and minimum in a PO set. So the first question which arises is, what do you mean by minimal element in a PO set? So to understand what a minimal element is, let us consider a PO set. So let P less than equal to be a PO set. Then an element A belonging to P is said to be minimal element of P if there is no element of P which is smaller than A. So an element A belonging to P will be a minimal element if you cannot find any Z belonging to P such that Z is smaller than A. So there should not exist any Z belonging to P such that Z is less than equal to A. Or in other words, you can even express this fact, this mathematical fact, by a statement like this, that is, if there is a Z belonging to P such that Z is less than equal to A, then that Z should be equal to A. So if such a thing happens, then you say that the element A belonging to P, this is a minimal element. Now if we express this mathematical fact diagrammatically using the hash diagram, that is, if we draw the hash diagram for the PO set P, then we will see that if A is the minimal element of P, then because there is no element of the PO set P which is smaller than A or which is less than A, so in the hash diagram, whenever A will be encountered, when you draw the hash diagram, whatever the hash diagram of P may look like, but when A is encountered, then we'll be able to see that there will be no element which will be below A, because there is no element which is smaller than A. So in the hash diagram there will be no element which will be below A. So in the hash diagram of any PO set, you will see that the minimal elements will be always the elements which are at the bottom. So all the bottom elements, the elements which I am shading, elements like these which are at the bottom, or if you just take another element like this, let's say an element like this which is at the bottom, so this particular element which is at the bottom, so all the elements which are shaded in a dark color, these elements are elements which are at the bottom, and all these elements are minimal elements just because there is no element which is below them, or there is no element which is smaller than them. So and this is how the concept of minimal element goes. Now coming to a few examples of minimal elements in PO sets. So if we take a PO set whose hash diagram looks like this, then we can see that for this particular element A, there is no element which is lower than A, or there is no element which is smaller than A. So this is a minimal element. For the same reason, this particular element B is also a minimal element, because there is no element which is smaller than B or which is lower than B. So these are the two minimal elements that we have in the PO set. So this is an example of a PO set with two minimal elements. So this example also illustrates the fact that we can have PO sets with more than one minimal element, as it is happening in this case. Now consider example 2, the second example. In this particular example, again, suppose there is a PO set whose hash diagrams looks like this. Then this particular element which has been labeled as A, and this particular element which has been labeled as B, both these elements are behaving in such a way that there is no element of the PO set which is below A, and there is no element of the PO set which is below B, which means that both these elements are minimal elements. So this is another example of a PO set with more than one minimal element. You can have a PO set with three minimal elements if the hash diagram looks somewhat like this, or if the hash diagram looks like this, then these are the four minimal elements. So we can have a PO set with any number of minimal elements. Again, if we take the third example, example 3, then this is a PO set in which there is an element A which is a minimal element, because there is no element which is smaller than A, there is no element which is lower than A, so this is a minimal element. And we can see that A is the only element in the PO set which is minimal, so in this case it will be called minimum. So when there is only one minimal element in the PO set, then it's called minimum. Also, we can see that this particular element A, which is the minimal element, is such that every x belonging to P, if we call this PO set, this particular PO set, if we call it as P, then every x belonging to P is such that A is less than equal to x. So A is smaller than every x belonging to P. So every element of the PO set P is bigger than A, or it is above A. So this is above A, this is above A, this is above A, and this is above A. So all the elements are above this element. All the elements of the PO set P are above A, which means that A is not only minimal, but it is minimum. So because this is the definition of a minimum element, that an element A is said to be minimum if all the elements of the PO set P are greater than that. So in that sense, A is the minimum. So A is minimal, and because A is the only minimal element, so it is also the minimum. So coming to a formal definition of minimum of a PO set. So this is how we define the minimum of a PO set formally. So let P less than equal to be a PO set, then an element A belonging to P is called the minimum or the least element if every element of P is bigger than it. So A will be called minimum if A is less than equal to x for all x belonging to P. So every element of P, every element x of P is bigger than A. In this case, if A is minimum, it is denoted by min P. And as a few notes, the first note is that a PO set cannot have more than one minimum. A PO set P will either have no minimum or it will have maximum one minimum. So a PO set P can have at most one least element or at most one minimum, and also the least element or the minimum is always the minimal. So which we can see, which we have seen in this particular example also, that here A is the minimum. This particular A, which is at the bottom, is the minimum as well as the minimal. So that was all about the minimal element in a PO set and minimum in a PO set.